Hello, how is everyone? I hope everybody's well and that life is good and all of that jazz. I, yesterday was crappy, but I'm going to try and move forward. That's where I'm at. Today I'm going to be talking about the question. Someone asked one of the viewers asked me to do an intro to the question. And the question in this case being the DC character, which has had a lot of different versions. So we should sort of talk about the history of the character because he's very fascinating. He's very interesting, and I am hard pressed to think of a good summation of the character. He is not just the detective superhero, although he's got that aspects to it. He's something else. He's sort of vaguely philosophical in nature, and there's a lot to the character. So I suppose I should start at the beginning. There's a artist and comic creator named Steve Ditko. He's probably best known for his work on Spider-Man, among others. Doctor Strange, Nick Fury of S.H.I.E.L.D. He was very integral to the look and feel of early Marvel Comics. Later on, he went on and did some other creations away from Marvel Comics, and one of which was for a company called Carlton. And he did a character named The Question, who was sort of a spin on another character he'd made called, what was the name of the other character? Mr. A. Yeah. So, Mr. A and The Question, to a lesser extent, were expressions of objectivism. They were objectivist heroes. And by that, it becomes very integral to their philosophy. Objectivism is a philosophy largely created by Ayn Rand, although it was elaborated on by other people. I'm not a big fan of objectivism, but some of the basic tenets of objectivism is that reality has objective facts about it. That knowledge that you can divine those objective facts about it, and those objective facts about an object or an individual are true. There are some other aspects to it that are pretty much better known. For instance, the notion that man is, the ultimate goal of man should always be that to his happiness, that it is wrong to sort of dissuade his creative tendencies, and this tends to lend to the libertarian philosophies of laissez-faire, and certainly that was Ayn Rand's big bent as well. I'm gonna hold off going into depth over the different controversies over the philosophical systems. You just need to understand that the character is very philosophical in nature. He's also very brutal in nature. For the time, there weren't a lot of comic book heroes that would just let a character die in the Silver Age of comics. The Question probably would. He was had a much harsher edge, and had a much more philosophical bent to why he was doing things. He wasn't doing it because of tragedy or any of the usual superhero motivations. It was deeply embedded in his philosophy. Now, the character's original name was Vic Sage. That was the, secret identity character name of the character, and he was an investigative journalist, and due to his contact with a scientist who created a fake skin, a pseudoderm that was originally going to be a treatment for wounds, but it turned out it was toxic to people having it put on your wounds, so was not really useful as a treatment for wounds. And the scientist and his partner agreed to, all right, this is not going to work. We'll leave it be. But then the scientist found out that his partner was going to go sell it to third world nations, and he goes to Vic Sage and gets his help. And Vic Sage uses the pseudoderm, the fake skin, as a mask. He can put it on over his skin, and it's renders his face completely anonymous. Hence his sort of blank face appearance whenever you see the character in the comics. Now, the interesting thing with this character is he didn't start out in DC Comics, but DC Comics ended up with him. And when they bought Carlton in the early 80s. Now, as a interesting side to this, Alan Moore was going to do the Watchmen based off of the characters from the Carlton comics. The character of Rorschach is a riff on the Question. Much darker riff on the Question. But yeah. And originally all of the characters were going to be Carlton comic book characters like the Blue Beetle and some others. But he eventually decided to sort of create his own characters, so they didn't get that as their rebirth into comics, which is probably for the best for the character. But yeah, the fact that he is tied to Rorschach has definitely affected how people have written the character since then. After the Crisis on Infinite Earths, all the Carlton characters got integrated into the greater DCU. So they started bringing in the character of the Question. And he was written by Denny O'Neil for a long time. Denny O'Neil did a lot of work on a lot of the iconic characters out of the 70s and 80s over at DC. Batman, he helped with the writing of the trying to think of the term, the hard traveling heroes with Green Arrow and Green Lantern. So yeah, he's got some writing chops to say the least, and he wrote the Question when he sort of got his own title over at DC. Now there are a few characters that pop up with the Question that have since become used by other titles in DC Comics. There's a character named Lady Shiva, who is the most dangerous hand-to-hand combatant in all of the DCU, with the possible exception of Richard Dragon, who also appears there. And Lady Shiva is an assassin, and she kicks the crap out of Vic Sage and then sends him to Richard Dragon to study under him. And so he develops a bunch of martial arts skills from encounters with these characters, and then comes back and has the face mask thing and becomes a hero in and of himself. They still maintain something of the philosophical edge to the character, but not quite the same tone. That character had an okay run, in the late 80s and early 90s. Another writer took him on, Veet, I think is his name, and he did all right with him, but turned him more of an urban shaman type character, which is sort of a demonstration of why the character is hard to pin down. There's so many different takes on him. The closest to a traditional superhero Denny O'Neil did, and even that one is not like a lot of the other superhero characters at the time. And he has never really had a firm identity that people could wrap around. I mean, he's a detective-style character, obviously. He's human. He doesn't have any superpowers. He's a good combatant, but he's no Batman. And depending on who's been writing him, of course. That's sort of where you get with the characters. You end up with a lot of odd takes on him over the years. There was a miniseries a few years ago at DC called 52, and it was sort of a big anthology piece. It was weekly, lots of different writers. It was actually really well done, and it's really well respected, and there's a major storyline involving the Question in it. And this storyline involves him giving up the mantle of being the Question to a police officer named Renee Montoya. Now, there are several things that you should know about Renee Montoya. First, the character was created for the Batman the Animated Series, and then made it over to comics. She was part of the Gotham Central PD storyline, but, I mean, that was well after the cartoon had finished. And people liked the character so much on the cartoon that they brought her over. Much like Harley Quinn in that regard. Anyways, she helps the Question make it back to Namba Parbat, where he dies of cancer, and she takes on his role. She becomes the new Question. And there was a whole run involving the character of the Question as per Renee Montoya. The other thing that is a relevant fact, just because there aren't a lot of characters that this can be said about, she was a lesbian. And actually was involved with Batwoman briefly, and there's some other characters that she was involved with over the course of time. Renee Montoya was one of the first prominently lesbian characters in comics. She's not the only one, but she's one of the early ones. And that is worthy of note. It's weird to say that it's worthy of note, because it shouldn't be, but it is. Anyway, they did a run with her for a while, and then they did the New 52 and sort of erased her as the Question. Which is annoying. I'm not going to lie. They have a new Question in the New 52, which is this sort of mystical character that has existed for, forever, apparently, who was one of the original three sinners, representative sinners in the world. Pandora, Judas Iscariot, and him. And you never find out his name because they erased his name and his identity from history and cursed him to wander the world looking for, they being a bunch of wizards, cursed him to wander the world seeking answers to a nebulous question that he can never define. Which would be kind of cool as an origin, I guess, except that the other character was not in any way mystical, so it's kind of a what's going on with that. Also, Vic Sage, the original character's name, has shown up in the New 52, but it's not the same guy. I got nothing. I don't know why they did that. To sum up, too late. But to sum up, the thing with the question is he is a nebulous character. He has been different things over the years, depending on the creator that dealt with him. Again, I'm going to say with him that what I said about Batman. The best stories involving the character didn't appear in the comics. The Justice League cartoon, Justice League Unlimited, which is after the first two series of Justice League, they expanded it out so there were a bunch of characters, and then they instead of having 2 or 3 episode arcs, they would have a bunch of individual stories that sort of loosely connected to an overall season arc. They introduced a bunch more DC characters, and one of them was the Question. And the Question in the cartoon is amazing. He is this intense conspiracy nut who finds the connections between all sorts of disparate things, and he seems crazy and kooky and weird, except turns out that he's right a lot of the time. And he, ends up being one of the heroes, the significant heroes of the first season of Justice League Unlimited, which involves a secret cabal of government types in the U.S. government who are trying to counteract the Justice League because they see it as a threat. And he discovers aspects of them, and things come to a head because he gets captured by the group, and Superman goes to go get him. That character, that characterization of the character, is probably the best I've ever seen of the character. I read some of the Denny O'Neil and the second series by Veidt. I'm not sure how it's pronounced. And I've read some of the stories involving Renee Montoya, which I really love. Those are great, and if you can find those, you should. But my favorite is still the cartoon version. It's tighter, it's a lot less confusing. He has some of that philosophical edge. He even, quotes some Ayn Rand at a couple of points. He has that sort of objectivism thing, but it doesn't get in the way of him being a superhero per se. He hangs with Batman and their lot, and I think that is probably the best version of him that you can find. So and Justice League Unlimited is up on Netflix. If you ever want to watch it, it's definitely worth watching. That is my intro to the Question. He's been around forever, it seems like, but really he's not. He comes out of the Silver Age of comics, and he is just this weird character that no one really has a firm, this is who this character is. So it's hard to define an intro to him, other than to say that at its heart, it's a human character with a philosophical edge who does superhero work. Beyond that, it's hard to pin down the character, and I kind of like that fact about him. I like the fact that he is hard to pin down. I really would like to see them abandon the sort of supernatural version and just make him a guy again in the New 52, because I think that version of him as a guy who may be crazy and maybe just deeply philosophical, who does this sort of thing because of, intellectual reasons, is more interesting. Anyway, that's my intro, and I hope you liked it. I hope it answers questions about the character if you didn't that you may have had, and gives you a place to start to understand the character. I will, put this out there. Does anybody else have any ideas of intros you'd like me to do? I can do another one. I'm looking for subjects, so let me know. Anyway, subscribe, like, share with all the people, and stay out of trouble. Night, folks.